Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just give people an opportunity to join the webinar. Thanks for your time and thanks for joining us today.
You're muted.
Sorry, thanks. Yeah, we'll get started in a minute. Thank you, App and Glow, Craig over there. Please use the Q&A feature here to ask questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end, towards the end of the webinar for the last 15 minutes. And we'll go ahead and get started. Right. All right. So thanks everybody for joining today. My name is Amber Center. I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of Supernova Women. We've been around since 2015, working to help Black and Brown cannabis operators and helping to create opportunities for those folks as well as drug war impacted people in the cannabis industry. And really happy to be joined today by Origins Council, Equity Trade, as well as California NORML to talk about AB 1111, which is the farmers market direct to consumer bill that has been passed by the California legislature and is sitting awaiting the governor's desk. So ask that you all scan this QR code here while we're on the call and go ahead and sign this letter in support of AB 1111. And I'll kick it off to well, I guess we'll do some quick intro. So kick it over to Origins Council and for an intro, and then Equity Trade, and then Ellen over at California NORML.
Thanks, Amber. Hello, everyone. My name is Janine Coleman. I'm the Executive Director of Origins Council. We're really excited to be here today and really appreciate the partnership. Thank you, everyone, for coming together. Our organization is a 501c4 nonprofit organization. Our programmatic scope includes education, advocacy, and research. And our mission is to support sustainable rural economic development for the historic cannabis farming regions of California. The way that we're structured, we partner with regional trade associations in those regions. We have 6 partners spanning from Trinity County into Humboldt County, Mendocino, Sonoma County, Nevada County, and then in the Central Coast, the Big Sur region, and Santa Cruz. Really happy to be here, and I'll pass it to Ross to introduce himself, and then we can go from there.
Thanks, Amber, for the introduction. My name is Russ Gordon. I am the policy chair with Origins Council, so I work closely with Janine on policy issues that we're working on at the state level and a bit at the federal level also. I don't think Janine mentioned we were the sponsors of AB1111 this year, and so really did a lot of work with our coalition partners trying to get the bill to this point where it's now on Governor Newsom's desk. So really excited to be talking about that and about what we can do to help encourage the governor to sign it. I'm also the policy director with Humboldt County Growers Alliance, which is one of the regional trade association partners that Janine mentioned of Origins Council. And I'm based here in Humboldt County in McKinleyville, and excited for the conversation today.
Thanks, Ross. Nina, you want to go next?
Yes. What's up, everybody? My name is Nita Parks. I am representing Equity Trade Network, as well as a co-founding member of Supernova Women. The organization Equity Trade Network really focuses on nurturing small business ecosystems within the equity sphere. We work not only with small businesses in equity, but also help to cultivate relationships with allies. And our mission is to help to increase visibility and awareness for folks that are in our ecosystem. We have worked on participating in a lot of events. So we have participated in multiple economic models and trying to make something work. And I'm excited to talk to you all about what could be possible with AB 1111 today.
Thanks, Nina. And last but not least, Ellen.
Here I am unmuted. Hi, I'm Ellen Comp. I'm Deputy Director of California NORML. We're an organization that has advocated for the rights of cannabis consumers in California since 1972. I'm going on my 33rd year as an activist for various groups, including NORML. For a time, I lived in Humboldt County and worked there for the Civil Liberties Monitoring Project, which advocated for growers in the Emerald Triangle. So very happy to join this call.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And thank you everybody for being here today and sharing your knowledge with our cannabis community here. And so next, Ross, I'll kick it over to you to get started, but also just want to quickly mention to everyone that this recording will be available at this URL here that you see on the screen, the shortened URL. So once we get through it, we'll upload it to YouTube and direct that URL there. Right, and I will stop sharing my screen so that you can take it away, Ross.
Let me just figure out how to share my screen here. So just want to start with a brief overview of what AB 1111 is and what it does. And I think we wanted to spend the bulk of the time here really talking about what the opportunities are if Governor Newsom does sign this bill and what the next steps forward might be. So just, from my perspective, starting with just basic background on what is AB 1111, what does it allow, what are the restrictions in it, and what are some of the basic components of the bill. So I think the easiest way to just summarize what AB 1111 is that it's a bill that allows small cultivators to sell their own cannabis products at cannabis events. And so it's an opportunity for small farmers to sell directly to consumers in those contexts. It's important to start with, I think, recognizing, as I'm sure many people here are aware, that we already have cannabis events in California, and we've had those since 2018 when Proposition 64 was implemented. So these are events with sales and consumption. They're regulated by the Department of Cannabis Control and by local governments. Some of the events folks might be familiar with: the Emerald Cup, the State Fair this year. Outside Lands has a space dedicated to sales and consumption. Cannafest was an event just held in Humboldt County. These are all examples of the types of cannabis events which are being held currently. So I think it's important to be clear that although these events could resemble farmers markets in certain ways, they take inspiration from farmers markets, traditional farmers markets in certain ways. They are something that is different and that is specifically a framework that's set up for these types of cannabis events. One of the major problems with these events currently, I wouldn't say the only one, but I think one of the major ones, is if you want to conduct sales at these events, there's only one way to do it. And that's to have a full-time 365-day-a-year license as a cannabis retailer, either a cannabis delivery service or a storefront dispensary. And if you're a small farmer, that's something which is almost certainly out of reach for you. It's probably out of reach financially, and in many cases, it's simply not even possible under your local ordinance to be able to obtain that type of license. Not to mention, it's not what most small farmers are trying to do. They're not trying to be full-time retailers. But in the same way that a market gardener might occasionally go to a farmer's market to sell their vegetables, cannabis farmers oftentimes may want to participate in these events, sell their products without being a retailer 365 days out of the year. So really what AB 1111 does at its core is that it allows specifically small farmers to be able to obtain a license that specifically allows them to sell just at these cannabis events without having to go through all of the red tape and financial and practical difficulty of getting a full-time license to be a cannabis dispensary, basically. And I think one way that's helpful to think about this is to think about how our current cannabis licensing framework is different from some of the opportunities that exist in the alcohol space in California. So if you search alcohol license types in California, just type it into Google. There's a website, webpage that shows the 99 different types of license types, which you can get if you sell beer, wine, or spirits in California. And this is just an example of a few of them. And it's a representative sample in the sense that if you want to sell at a farmer's market in California, an alcoholic product, you get a permit for farmer's market sales. You don't get a license to be a full-time alcohol retailer. You get a permit for the activity that you are trying to do. And so there's many of these different activities. Most of these licenses in alcohol are inexpensive. We're talking about $80 to $150. And so I think AB 1111 is a good example of something which is sort of a conceptual point, in my opinion, which is if you have low barrier to entry licenses that authorize specifically the events that small businesses want to do, that is a really useful and important way to enable more small businesses to be able to do the things they need and to be successful. So the last thing I wanted to talk about before passing things off to some of the other panelists here is the limitations in AB 1111. So briefly, I just want to address why are there limitations at all? And really the simple answer is that it's the legislative sausage making process. There's a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different legislators who had different opinions, concerns, perspectives about this bill. And at the end of the day, this was a bill that passed the California State Senate with a 0-vote margin. It received 27 votes in the California State Senate. It needed 27 votes to pass. And so for us working on the bill and working with Assemblymember Pellerin on the bill, it was necessary to look at what restrictions would make the bill viable, actually able to pass, move forward, address people's concerns, while at the same time making the bill still something that's worthwhile for small farmers. So happy to go into, if there's questions, why some of these restrictions are here and the way they are. In some cases, it's a bit detailed, but big picture, that's the reason that these types of restrictions are in the legislation. So first restriction, the sales can only take place at licensed cannabis events, as we've already talked about. A second limitation, cultivators participating in these events can only sell products that contain their own cannabis. So that could be their cannabis flower, but I think it's worth pointing out that could also be a manufactured product that contains cannabis cultivated by that farmer. And they didn't necessarily have to manufacture it, so they could work with a manufacturer in a partnership to sell those products that contain their cannabis. There's a limitation on the annual sales at these events. So farmers are capped at, sorry, 1 second, $175,000 of sales annually, specifically at these events. And a small nuance that's worth noting, that number is not including tax. So if you're selling $30 eighths and you're paying, let's say, $8 in local and state tax, that $30 is what is counting towards that $175,000 cap, not the $38. A distribution license is required to transport product to and from these events. One thing I'd note is that this is not required to be a third-party distributor, but there is a requirement for a distribution license to be involved in that transport, as with anything else that happens currently in California cannabis. And the last thing I'd say, and left this for last because unfortunately it takes a bit longer to explain than I'd like, the license type is limited to small cultivators. So what is a small cultivator? That definition will change a bit over time. So this program under the legislation will open no later than January 1st, 2026. Starting January 1st, 2027, that's when the full eligibility of the program becomes available. At that point, eligible small cultivators are those with 1 acre or less of outdoor cultivation, 22,000 square feet or less of mixed light 1 cultivation, and 5,000 square feet or less of indoor or mixed light 2 cultivation. When the program opens on January 1st, 2026, the eligibility requirements are a bit stricter. So 10,000 square feet of outdoor cultivation, 5,000 square feet of mixed light 1 cultivation, and 2,500 square feet or less of mixed light 2 or indoor cultivation. With one exception, which is that if you are a locally verified equity cultivator, those larger size restrictions that kick in January 1st, 2027 apply to you a year early, starting in 2026. So in other words, if you have an acre of outdoor cultivation, if you're an equity qualified cultivator locally, you can obtain this license starting January 1st, 2026. If you're not a equity qualified cultivator locally, you'd have to wait until January 1st, 2027 to have that opportunity. So that's an overview of the different limitations that are in the bill. Again, happy to answer any questions about that when we get to Q&A, or if folks want to put them in the chat. Happy to go into details about why those are the way they are. But just wanted to offer that as sort of an initial overview of what's in the bill. So with that, happy to turn it over to Janine to talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities that we see for this legislation for small cultivators if it is signed by Governor Newsom this month.
Thanks, Ross. Really appreciate the breakdown about the bill. And I just want to say from the onset that, one of the things all of our organizations have in common is the prioritization of small businesses. And for us, that really wraps around the core of independently owned and operated businesses. And in looking at the scale considerations, we really put a lot of consideration over the years into understanding where that opportunity is really needed for small businesses that don't have the capital and the resources to vertically integrate in the traditional sense to get to market and make their own direct sales through vertical integration. So in looking at, what the opportunities are here and how this affects stakeholders and really honing in on small farmers, one of the things that we really prioritize in our work with Origins Council is both what are the immediate needs on the ground and what are the long-term opportunities that we need to normalize cannabis agriculture as agriculture, farmers as farmers, and small craft producers. And direct-to-consumer sales obviously are, the cornerstone of that opportunity and those policy constructs that need to be in place to truly repeal prohibition and put this opportunity forward for small businesses, small farmers. In the long game, it's going to be hard to survive. For those that are servicing the wholesale market, we will be facing in the future an approaching reality of imported cannabis inputs and products, hemp potentially, from regions where production is exponentially cheaper. So AB 1111 creates a direct-to-consumer pathway to market for small batch producers. and opportunities to work in the brand space. So, building a brand is no small endeavor. It's expensive. This is an opportunity to partner with brands, those that are already in the brand space. And so what you'll see as a common theme as we have this discussion, we had a great prep meeting and a lot of things came up, and the overarching thrust of it was collaboration, right? And an all ships rise opportunity here. Another thing to point out is that the bill authorizes cultivators to sell any products that contain 100% of their cannabis. So that creates an opportunity to partner with manufacturers at events. The market research opportunity, really want to acknowledge Ellen had a great comment about the crisis we see with the shrinking biodiversity in our cannabis cultivars and how that's impacting especially patients, right? And so the opportunity for the craft producer, the breeders to engage directly with consumers and do that market R&D, mutually with consumers so that, as we're developing and innovating our genetics, you've got that engagement happening directly with the consumer. I think that's a really important piece. And it kind of lends to the broader consumer education need. One of the toughest nuts to crack that we found, right, since legalization is consumer education. There's a lot of folks doing great work on this, and I want to shout out to Sun and Earth, the folks from Buddhist, the Ganjier folks, Equity Trade Network, and the Legacy Market is a tremendous educational opportunity. You guys are doing excellent work. The State Fair Cannabis Awards and Exhibition, and of course the Emerald Cup. But this is a space that needs a lot of work. I mean, we've got the OCal certification. Consumers need to understand that that's organic. We can't use the word organic, right? We've got to get out there and we've got to have these conversations directly. And consumers care. I mean, they want to learn directly from the farmers and the breeders and the medicine makers and manufacturers. So those are all really important opportunities. And the last thing I want to touch on is the producer to retail partnership opportunities. When we have a severe problem going on with the reality of local control and the resulting deserts, right, for access that we're facing, retail deserts. So, Ramon was conveying like the incredible experience at the state fair, 17 days successively, folks pouring in from dry regions and really wanting to understand where they could get these products in terms of the closest retailers to them. This is an opportunity for activism, activating those constituents, the consumers and the patients, to go back and push their local government for local retail access. These are all the opportunities that we see, building the regulated consumer base. So again, we're really excited to partner on this and really urge support, to get the governor to sign the bill so that we can move these opportunities forward in collaboration and partnership.
Thank you, Janine. Ross, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Nina and Ramon, do you both want to speak a bit about distribution and cannabis events and how you all envision this playing out as far as the distribution and transport of it goes?
Definitely. Ramon can touch on that, and then I'll jump on the cannabis events and the pluses and minuses of it. Yes.
Yeah, in terms of distribution, I think, visibly, distribution been a problem point. That's why I jumped into distribution, because ultimately, it is a vessel of the brand, but it is the license type of, again, going to Janine's point earlier of collaboration is how we collaborate. So distributors are technically a vessel of the brand. Is how I run my distribution as well. Is like, it's not here to profit, but it allows us a unique opportunity to be able to get our products to the market. So we're able to partner in with smaller equity operators that might not have licenses, license their products and get products to the market, which leads to kind of this conversation as well. Like, if you have a self-distribution license, I believe that's included where you can distribute your own products if you have that distribution model. But for a distributor myself, it has increased the visibility of not only the brands, because we are a vessel of the brands, getting to that direct consumer opportunity, but it has increased opportunities overall. As a distributor, like we're limited to doing stuff directly to retail. Most of the time we're waiting 30 days and longer for payment. With the events that we've been doing, we've been able to turn over more back to the brand at a quicker rate, and have a little control of like you were talking about earlier, direct to consumer, being to educate the consumer, increase the visibility of each legacy farm or equity brand, and then also direct that back to retailers. And so we've been able to partner with multiple different retailers in doing these events that also have been mutually beneficial, not just to the farm or the brand, but also to the retailer itself. Like Janine said, people need to be able to find your products later on. And so it's created these increased opportunities because we've done legacy to equity kind of connections where we've sourced a lot of legacy products to equity brands. I'll just take Sanctuary Farms, for instance. We are an equity operator, cultivator, small cultivator, but what doesn't go in our bags or our products goes in other equity operators' products and brands. And so it increases the diversity of the products we're able to grow. We're able to grow more strains and source products to smaller producers and be able to be in that source. And so if you're looking at a bill like this, it's not just the products that you are creating for your brand, but like Ross and them elaborated on, the products that you're manufacturing or the products that you're sourcing 100% of your product to a smaller equity brand, and their products also would qualify for this. And so we have the unique opportunity to structure this in a way where everybody benefits from it, and it does increase more visibility. Yes, like there's nothing stopping us from throwing a small event on the farm, and then people are able to visit our farm and do this through the proper channels and be able to do those things. So it increases the opportunity to kind of push back a little bit on some of these things and do some of the things our way. From a small cultivators standpoint, like I said, there's that increased benefit of being able to sell other products that you source your product 100% or manufacture your product out of. And so it creates a unique little ecosystem that we can actually have a little bit of control over. And honestly, events have been, the state fair was massive. Like there's no way we ever could have prepared for that kind of opportunity, but it was the prime example of, like, here you had a function that all ages could go to, yet we were still able to maintain a cannabis sales and consumption area that didn't create any kind of interaction. And you had consumers 40 and up, majority, that were consuming from areas that were blacked out, like buying every single product, not just looking for stizzy or whatever. Like our booth did half of the retail sales there. And so, like there is this massive statement being said by what was done at the state fair over 14 days. There's just no way that we could have understood that, and it set precedents for every fairground to be able to do it. By day 3, you had San Diego, Orange County, LA County fairgrounds calling saying, hey, we want to do this. And so now we have the opportunity to also push event language and take control a little bit of how we access consumers to the market.
Right. So I want to look at this in a few different ways. I want to look at it as the opportunity that this presents, as well as the future advocacy that's still necessary to actually have the intent fully realized, because it's direct to consumer, but not necessarily direct to consumer, right? Right, because it still has the buffer of whether or not you're partnered with an event, someone that's holding an event license, you obviously as a business could hold the event license and organize it, but you are still responsible, if that's your goal, to jump through all those flaming fiery hoops of doom that come with it. So not to be the Debbie Downer of opportunity, but I just want to be very transparent about what it means and what it doesn't mean, right? Just so that people are super clear on that. This effectively allows, so for everybody that's on the call that have been brands and or cultivators that have participated in event sales, this will allow you to get a sales license for the day and be able to go ahead and run your booth and like partner with a POS system, be able to operate your own registry, and then also you are responsible for being compliant with the remittance of the tax, right? For folks that have participated in the legacy market, you already know that like you have the capability of like operating like a sales booth, right? And being able to run those retail things, so that the skill set is not hella hard, right? Like that is something totally people can develop that skill set and you can do it. However, right, what we've seen right now, right, is that we've had to partner with retailers that end up getting a big markup without passing on like the labor cost to us. And so that's something that this will mitigate and allow us to actually be able to receive the money for the work that we're putting in, essentially, right? But still restricted in the sense that you have to partner with a cultivator that meets the small business framework that this bill lays out, right? So again, a few restrictions. We still have a lot of work to do in regards to reforming the event organizer language. It is super costly, and currently for anybody participating, it ends up you barely end up breaking even right now. So really, what this allows is for the potential for small brands to either break even on the cost that it takes to be able to rent the space at the booth, staff it for several days, and be able to produce enough product to be on the shelves for it. But what it also does is it allows for the visibility, the direct to consumer like relationship for you to actually build out brand recognition, like brand experience. So these things are all super, super necessary, and it could potentially, this bill can potentially allow us to have a better economic framework so that we're not just in the red. Right. Especially because a lot of the events are not like the 17-day opportunity that the state fair was, which allowed people to actually go beyond breaking even. But most things are like like 1 to 3 days. And like in that time period, it is super hard to try to make back what you spent on actually being there. So what this effectively does, it gives us the opportunity to at least break even. And if we're really running some great operations, you can potentially like raise up a little bit. So again, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer on things, but I also don't want us to like walk away from here and not be realistic about like what you're going to have to plan for. And again, I think it's really the amazing opportunity of collaboration. I really wanting to drive that one home is that those who are producing brands and who are manufacturing products, this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to build with the farms. And as we know, like for the mission and vision of California Cannabis and our desire to keep the cachet and the cultural cachet of California Cannabis high, this also gives us an opportunity to continue to build on that brand for California Cannabis and products coming from it. Additionally, it allows for these small cultivators who have been blocked out by a lot of the retailers because they're saying that like no one's buying that particular cultivar, to actually like introduce new things to the market and get more product diversity out there. So I really am looking forward to that.
And what it also, to balance it out, what it also provides the opportunity for, because like realistically, Nina talked about, with every retailer, there's been an average of a 2.5 time markup on your product. And so realistically, there's no need for that. If you're doing an individual smaller event, it can be that you as a cultivator get a greater wholesale value for your product. You're able to keep the price point still down at a price point that consumers like, because you don't have to mark it up 2 times and cover your taxes. Maybe it's a one time, maybe it's a 0.5% markup in your taxes, but you allow yourself, there's ways where now we can split that in partnership, and it could benefit you as an individual smaller brand by getting higher than average wholesale for your product, right?
Exactly. I think that's the gist of it. I do want to open it up for,
No, not yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ellen, would love for you to talk about how this impacts consumers.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so, as a consumer myself, I go into your average retailer and usually everything's already packaged on a wall somewhere. And I can't smell it. Sometimes they have a smell jar, but not often. I can't really usually find out anything about, where it was grown or how it was grown, or if, organic practices were used, if it was outdoor, anything like that. Um, and just like when I buy, my produce, I like to know, all of those things. And I like to meet my farmer. And it's very hard to do that in the cannabis space, much harder to do that really than maybe when it was illegal. So uh, I like this bill because it broadens the experience for the cannabis consumer. We've legalized it and put so many shackles on the industry that it's not succeeding in the way that it could have, that we still have, a gray market that's not necessarily safe because it's not tested or proven. And so as far as consumer advocacy for safety, awareness, and diversity, yes. It's to where, I lived in Humboldt County. I saw all those strains and everything that were out there. Those, I asked some guy, where'd you get this strain? Oh, I brought back the seeds from Thailand in the hem of my jeans in 1972, and I've been like developing it ever since. And I'm hearing a lot of those farmers now are giving up on growing because they can't make a living at it. And, I like to say, well, I don't like to say it, but I too often say it. I didn't work for, 30 years for legalization, just for like a handful of venture capitalists, white guys out of Canada and stuff, who are just, not giving us the diversity of strains that you need. And yes, particularly if you're a medical patient, I want to know where my medicine's coming from. I want to know where it's grown. So there's a lot of reasons that, consumers could benefit from this law. I've always seen it as it should be more of a wine model. We should be able to have tastings like they do in the wine industry. And I think this is a step towards something like that, where, and also our community likes to gather. We like to do things together. We like to enjoy cannabis together. There are very few places where we can. We're having to fight for cannabis lounges to open in places. We're having to fight for the ability for a lounge to sell a cup of coffee or a sandwich that they prepare at that lounge. The governor vetoed that bill last year, and we're having to fight for it again this year. AB 1775 is the bill number. So I hear people, and I've seen some comments already about, the frustration of incremental change. And, part of it is the federal illegality, which has required, regulating it like it's plutonium, as far as tracking and tracing it, which is, crazy. Yeah, I'd like to be able to go to my grower and buy a pound of pot like you can buy a case of wine, and I'm hoping that that day is something that we're still working towards, because it's hemp will save the planet, right? So let's see what else I want to say. According to our, polls that we've taken, people want to buy equity products. They want to buy organic products. They want to know their farmer. And the current system isn't allowing that. It's really putting a straitjacket on the industry, on something that could be so beautiful and free, if we allow it to. Tourism could increase with something like this. And so, yes, I also was at the state fair, was very elated to see the positive response there. reporters were calling me before, oh, what's going to be the effect of this? I said, it's going to be great because I know my people, they loved it. You know, people came from all over, people who don't have access where they are, or maybe have to rely on a delivery service that doesn't have very much, you know, variety. Older people and younger came. So we have a great product if we can find more ways to get it to people in, you know, sure, safe ways and ways that, you know, our community appreciates, then it's gonna lift all the boats. And yes, I do think it will help retailers in the end, because retailers have testified on this, saying that, you know, someone tries something that they liked at an event and they're going to come and buy it from me for the rest of the year. And local normal chapters have helped open retail establishments in Contra Costa County and other places. So if people are interested in doing something like that, contact me. And yeah, please write to the governor on this bill. He needs to be told that this needs to sign. I was in Humboldt when Gavin came and pushed Prop 64, and he, you know, pledged that he was going to help the small farmer. And now's a good time to remind him of that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ellen, and thanks for the reminder on reminding the governor of his promises. It seems like we have to do that a lot. And so now I want to talk a bit about I guess some of the reforming and some of the work that we're going to be doing to this. As you know, Janine, I saw one of your answers in the Q&A that, you know, this is our foot in the door. This is a wedge, you know, and this is incremental change. And unfortunately, that's how it is. You know, let's talk about where we were 15 years ago. You know, like we've had a lot of incremental changes, but obviously it's been progress. And maybe we can talk a bit about some of the reforms and things that we want to do to make it easier to work through this bill, AB 1111.
Well, I'm happy to jump in right away and just say that, you know, for us in the rural communities, part of what we need right now is anything to drive the economy. I mean, our economies are collapsing straight up. And so looking at agritourism is one sector that cannabis can tag onto effectively. And so when it comes to smaller scale, rural farmers market type events in our communities, we really need to look at reforming particularly the cost for small scale events and the licensing costs that are associated with events, producers, and those costs. And so I think that's one area that, you know, we don't see necessarily needing statutory reform. It's an opportunity for regulatory reform. And those are rare, more rare. And so getting this bill into law creates that opportunity to start to try and reform the whole events framework to make it more in reach for small scale events and small businesses. So that's something I just wanted to put right in the front.
Right. So currently, right, we're seeing that a person needs to apply for an event organizer license, which costs anywhere from like $3,000 to $5,000, depending on how many events that you want to put forth. I think this license type needs to be done away with, honestly, because it does nothing more than say that you can talk to people to put pieces together and put up signage, and you're the one responsible for putting up signage and remitting all of the connectivity reports to the DCC. So essentially you're paying them so that you can talk to people and submit more paperwork. Because like on it, it also says that you cannot benefit from any profits coming from cannabis sales as an event organizer. So it's a license that has like very little economic viability, to the point that even folks that were doing 420 Hippie Hill were like, we're not participating in this year. And then for me with Carnival, which I, you know, like I advocated to be able to do in San Francisco for over 5 years, was not viable as an event, right? Just basis on the like as a person holding that license type.
And just for point of reference, you know, we've been doing events with Embark Events the last 5 years. They have not they have lost money on every single event since 2019.
So currently, we really do need to do a economic assessment of the viability of cannabis events and figure out a new framework that actually makes it worth participating in. Because more and more we're finding it difficult to find even bigger players wanting to sponsor these events because they also don't see a good ROI on the way that the framework is set up. And it's becoming like more difficult to do cool shit with your friends, essentially. You know what I mean? So like if we're like, you know, like just to keep it super simple, you know what I mean?
And prime example is like what's been going on with the Emerald Cup and how they've been forced into that. Again, another event that was viable prior to 2019 that has taken considerable losses every year since. And so the structure is not set up for viability, and it needs to be changed.
Because once you have the event organizer license, you still have to pay for a temporary sales permit, right? Which costs another 3 to 5K or like whatever it is, and depending on how big your event is. So again, like being able to put forth maybe smaller tiers could definitely help. That doesn't have to be a legislative thing. That could be a regulatory thing, and getting the DCC to develop other tiers for small, like that are actually made for smaller businesses and for farmers markets potentially. Ross, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to add two quick things. One is that if Governor Newsom does sign this bill and it's moving forward to implementation, there's going to be additional regulations that the DCC comes out with to flesh out some of these details. And so I think that's going to be an opportunity to push on a lot of these details. I see there are questions in the chat, for example, about distribution. Is it a full-scale distributor that's required to transport to these events, or does a transport-only license work? That's not something that's specified in the bill. So that's going to be something that's worked out in regulation. Same thing with licensing fees for this license type. That's not something that's specified in the bill. The DCC is going to decide that in regulation. I think there's a really good argument for why it should be a very low cost. But that's something that we're going to have to engage on, right? And so I think if this bill is signed, there's a lot of work ahead of us on that set of regulations, and also more broadly on the event structure, both in terms of making these events more profitable for and viable for the organizers, as well as for anybody who's participating in the events, whether that's a full-time retailer or a small farmer who's using this license type.
There was something also in the chat or in the Q&A that says that we have found events to be more about PR than profits so far, which is true, but it's ridiculous then to have a license type that people have to pay for something that they can't profit off of. Like it's actually, it feels really unethical of the state to charge us that much money to be able to do these without any ability to make any money. Because we're paying them for the fee, and then we're giving them the taxes from the sales that we make that we can't profit off of.
And we have a lot of like event organizers that a lot of data to, kind of support that. And they've been behind pushing event language to change, to make sure that there is a structure exactly like what we're talking. This could set precedents for changing event language so it is tiered, so there are smaller licenses available to do structured events that helps everybody, the retailers, the consumers, the cultivators and manufacturers. And so this was part of the whole ecosystem of what allowed us to do this prior to Prop 64, and it's been a big piece that's been cut out of us being able to get directly to the consumers. And so this is an avenue to be able to push those conversations further, and there has been a lot of support for doing that.
I would be curious, like when this passes, right? I would be curious if we could push the state to do like the state controller's office or whomever does is in charge of that data, to be able to put together report on like the economic viability of events in cannabis events in California prior to them making any more regulations on it, so that we can potentially get some reasonable regs or common sense regs.
Yeah, I also want to mention, as far as amendments to AB 1111, that we also want to push and make sure that all small producers are included. And that means small manufacturers as well. So what's the definition of small? I mean, that's still to be determined, but as far as the SHIP Act goes, the definition of a small manufacturer is gross revenues of $5 million or less.
Yeah, we're really hoping to get this bill into law and be able to do that work as soon as possible. It was something we wanted to have in the bill originally, but the legislature was not interested in advancing that piece at this time.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, what we can make happen, it depends on what we can get through, what we can get signed. And, we're still coming from, from where we still had prohibition, it was profitable when it was illegal if, you didn't get caught. And, there were dollar signs in the eyes of all the legislators, that we were going to make so much, tax revenue, and that is not panning out. I'm just going to post something about, the inequities of the tax, very little tax on wine and beer or even cigarettes compared to cannabis. And, we're just bringing the golden goose to death, in so many ways. And so that's a reality that we have to grapple with and every day. And so much work is put in by Origins Council and other people to get what we can get, move the ball forward somehow, and yeah, we all want more. And things can come back to bite you. Things will have to be reconfigured. There'll have to be changes made, but I hope we can get this passed and signed, because I think it's going to be a good sign that California is supportive of its farmers and the industry in general.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we've got growers associations and other small business associations all across the United States watching this, right? And trying to make their own reforms to move direct to consumer sales forward. And, we benefit a lot from the mentorship of the wine industry because of our work with appellations policy. And, you can see that this is one of those holy grail policies. It takes time and it takes determination and it takes coalition. And it does take incremental progress. And you'll see wine has done the best with that. Beer, is a close second. The spirits are behind, right? And it has taken decades for them to get where they are. So we can get this into law. This is really, truly a huge precedent to advance the overall mission for direct-to-consumer sales for small businesses, period.
Yeah, I think there was a question in there.
I was going to ask Nina if she wanted to answer that question live versus typing it.
Oh, okay, I'll answer it live too.
Yep.
So the question was whether or not other like non-cannabis items are allowed to be sold at these events for like merch, food, etc. That is allowed. Like the sale of merch and food is allowed at these events, but it's always going to be up to the organizers of how that pans out, right? So for instance, like Grasslands was very adamant about only their items being sold, like only their merch items. They were very clear about like what kind of items were not like that we couldn't provide. So like no hoodies, no shirts, no like other things that they figured that people would buy, especially on a foggy day in in Golden Gate Park. They wanted to benefit from all those sales. Also because again, like being an event organizer is not profitable. So for them to try to protect that as their source of income or the potential source of income in order to be able to cover their costs. Because again, like with some of these regulations, it's like all cannabis sales and consumption cannot happen within public view. right? So what that also forces is that we create barricades and build out like a small level Fort Knox in order to be able to conduct these sales, because it's so dangerous for kids to see us smoking versus like all their parents getting drunk on the ground level where they have like barnyard animals and other things. You know what I'm saying? Or like, you know what I mean? Like it's it's wild. Anyways, so yes, to answer your question, merchant food is available to be sold at these events already, regardless of this legislation. However, always up to the event organizers.
And to Nina's point earlier, like, just know the the goal is always to make those permit fees low as possible, but there are other costs to events that you can pretty much guarantee that they're going to put on there, like what Nina was talking about, having to have fencing and separation and security and some of these other things. And so like Nina was saying, and Janine was saying earlier, this is just opening the door to much greater work.
What this allows, actually, which is amazing, is that it allows us to create an appetite for regulators and lawmakers to continue the conversation forward, because as y'all know, it's hard, like once they've paid attention to something for a while, like they will just want it off their plate and they won't want to continue conversation. So the conversation around events reform hasn't happened since like 2018.
And honestly, like, oddly enough, and Nina and myself have data going past this last year with doing what we've been doing with events the past year and a half, like data, um, even though it hasn't been a necessarily highly profitable thing for, or profitable in any way for the event organizer, I've found that small bit brands and legacy operators have, it's helped them stay alive. It is literally increased their sales back up to a point that it has helped them realize at least some kind of hope and be able to increase sales and the value of their product that's being sold. It's not just the visibility. And so the sales that happen at these events definitely do help supplement what the market is right now, which is being dictated by buyers and retailers and their metrics.
So we've heard a lot of pushback from retailers in regards to like this being something that was going to cut into their potential profitability. However, the other complaint that we also have from retailers, especially for smaller manufacturers, cultivators, et cetera, is that you guys are too small to be able to provide market awareness about your product. And so like, we don't want to put it on our shelves because nobody knows about it. And then there's the other piece of like not having, like a small business is not having enough brand representation or ambassadors to be able to do the in-stores so that there is an awareness. Again, what we've been able to do with the legacy market model that we've done through equity trade, right, is that we've galvanized about let's say like 37 small businesses to come under one banner to do sales with each other. And this is the way that we've been able to offset cost as well as increase the potential for some level of profitability, not only for ourselves, like as a whole, but also for the retailer. Because actually the retailer, the way that we've done it is the retailer has not had to operate the retailer. We just needed them to like create the menus, count out the till, count in the till, count out the till, and then they're responsible for all the admin afterwards.
It's 4:30.
Okay, got you. So, like this one will be able to allow us another model where we can potentially have money to be able to do the in-store pop-ups and hire another staff, et cetera. So that's the finishing of my thought. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So it's 4:30, everybody. Just want to remind you again to scan this QR code and sign the letter telling Governor Newsom to sign AB 1111. Thank you for joining us today. And again, this webinar will be available. So you can watch it again through this shortened URL here later on this evening. Don't forget to follow all of us on Instagram, and we will continue to work on behalf of our craft cannabis community. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody.